Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ISIS Affairs Forum titled Getting Off the Menu to the Table, Developing a Cadre of Cyber Diplomats. Before starting off, we wish to invite you to share your questions in the Q&A function, which differs from the chat function. Nonetheless, feel free to share any reflections in the chat section throughout the whole forum. Starting today's program, I wish to invite Mr. Shariman Lokman, Director in the Chief Executive's Office, to deliver the opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this event. I'm speaking on behalf of the Chief Executive of ISIS Malaysia, Mr. Harizal Hazri. He was supposed to present the opening remarks this morning, but he was asked to attend an important meeting on an issue of some urgency. I think you might be able to guess what that is. But in any case, a bit of an explanation about the title, Getting Off the Menu to the Table. So that bit of the title comes from the the often said thing about multilateral diplomacy. If you are not at the table in multilateral diplomatic conferences, you are essentially on the menu. Basically, if you don't participate, then decisions will be made for you. And part of this thinking, and the reason why ISIS has been thinking about this, at least, Farina, has it been for a year now that we've been seriously thinking about this? Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah. So for the past year, we've been writing things for the Foreign Ministry. Been thinking about this issue. Is that we were reflecting about how Malaysia, although we were involved in something else called the UN Conference on the Law of the Sea. This is the essentially the conference that wrote the rules and on the law of the sea. We were there, but only at the tail end of the UN Conference on the Law of the Sea. It started in 1956. It did not. There were 3 of those conferences, and the third conference didn't end until 1982, or rather, with the signing of the convention. So it took a long time, because we were a post-colonial state, we didn't quite have the capacity to participate, so the rules were written, mainly by the major powers, So we were thinking, we must not lose the opportunity to write the rules when it comes to cyber. We must be at the table. We must not allow ourselves to be, we must not allow other countries to write the rules for us. As a result, I think it's very important for us to develop this capacity to engage other countries, to engage in multilateral diplomacy on cyber issues. And so Farina has been at the forefront of thinking about this issue within ISIS Malaysia, and she is very proactively put this event together. And together with her in moderating this event is Muhammad Sinatra, another colleague of ours. And before I pass things back to Farina, I'd just like to thank our speaker today, Mr. Henry Carver, First Secretary from the FCDO, and our discussant, Puan Hafiz Abdullah from the Institute of Diplomacy and Foreign Relations. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your thoughts and expertise this morning. Back to you, Farina.
Thank you very much, Shariman, for the kind words and for the encouragement. So moving on with this morning's program, I'm pleased to invite our speakers to take the floor. So just a little background and to add a little bit more based on what Shariman was actually saying earlier. Malaysia's digitization journey can actually be traced back to policies stimulating the multimedia super corridor and encouraging connectivity. Today, Malaysia's digital maturity is a journey that is still unfolding, with approximately 80% of the population online, while challenges of the pandemic actually displayed the opportunities of cyberspace, whether it is to use private platforms such as Zoom conferencing to conduct the daily affairs of an organization, or to utilize e-commerce and e-payment platforms that minimizes contact and facilitates movement. However, as the nation actually grapples with domestic issues such as cultivating talent, and digitizing SMEs or building better internet connectivity, the government has to face a digital frontier where security in cyberspace is as much about assets, international collaborations as it is about geopolitics. Cyber, being a vital medium for development, is notorious for its dual use capabilities. The exploitation of vulnerabilities and strategic considerations have seen developments in the military domain, international political economy, and lawfare. For instance, the increasing normalization of gray zone operations as part of doctrine, techno-nationalist rhetoric on supply chains, and the exploitation of developing areas of law and cyberspace can sow instability and distrust between nations. So as cyber becomes an arena for malicious actors, states would have to diversify approaches, whether it is to sign bilateral agreements that addresses cyber espionage, to make collective statements on commitments towards cyber norms, or to consider sanctions as a means of deterrence. However, room for diplomatic action is anchored on certainty and attribution. Essentially, the diplomat's role in addressing cyber operations can range from trust building or encouraging confidence building measures to playing a direct role in response of a cyber incident, to shaping norms that could prevent further misuse of ICTs and protecting users and systems of cyber. So with us today are two speakers able to share their insights on diplomacy, cyber, and its future for diplomats. First, we have Mr. Henry Carver, who is the UK government lead for cyber policy covering the ASEAN region and part of the UK Cyber Diplomacy Network. With over 10 years experience in the UK civil service, he has had wide-ranging experience in the cyber and digital fields, both domestic and international. Contextualizing the presentation with a Malaysian perspective is Ms. Hafiza Abdullah. Ms. Hafiza Abdullah assumes the position of the Director of the Competency Enhancement Center at the Institute of Diplomacy and Foreign Relations. She takes over the helm following her tenure as the Deputy Director General of ASEAN Economic Community Division at ASEAN Malaysia National Secretariat, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So the co-moderator for this session is Mr. Muhammad Sinatra, analyst in foreign policy and security studies of ISIS Malaysia. Without further ado, I wish to invite Mr. Henry Carver to take the floor. Mr. Carver, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Paulina. Thank you also thank you so much, Shariman, as well, for your kind opening remarks. And before I even begin, I just want to say I completely agree. I was really struck by what you were saying about rules of the road, about the need for Malaysia to help shape kind of the emerging kind of what cyber and kind of cyberspace will look like in the future. And that's something that's very clear from the UK, that obviously was one of the major powers over the last few years from the Cold War era. We have, I think, and it's something that's been very much articulated in the integrated review that we've had recently, that we'll be talking about later, is very much that the status quo, particularly in cyberspace, is something that needs to move on, it needs to develop. And it's, I think, a case for all states, not just the UK, but Malaysia, ASEAN, globally, to engage in this and be pragmatic on about how they engage and find a way forward that makes a kind of free, open, peaceful and secure cyberspace for all. And that's kind of the key principles where kind of the work that we start. But anyway, let's start. First of all, I want to thank everyone who's been able to take their time to join this seminar. But notably, I would like to thank Shariman Lockman, Ms. Paulina Said, Mr. Mohammed Sinatra, on obviously the work they're doing and setting up this this seminar, this presentation, as well as all the colleagues from private sector, government, academia who can join and hopefully is listening in to this seminar. I would very much wish I could have done this in person in Malaysia, and hopefully in a few months' time, or well, touch wood, I will be able to do so. But for now, it's great seeing you all here on the channel, and I hope you find this session useful. Right, so order of the day, I've been asked to talk about kind of digital or cyber diplomacy. And in the UK, we're beginning to slightly tend towards digital, because when we talk about cyber diplomacy, everyone automatically assumes it's just about cyber security, when in reality, it kind of covers a multitude of areas around emerging technologies, kind of the wider kind of aspects around all things technology, regulatory diplomacy, data policy, cybersecurity, supply chains. And it's a wide variety. So that's just why sometimes I say digital, sometimes I say cyber, in reality, people who know what cyber means, it's talking about cyberspace, but it goes beyond just the cybersecurity side. And that's one of the big parts. It's a huge upsurge across the UK. And one of the things that it's done is give birth to, in the UK network, a kind of a cadre, if you're British, a cadre, apparently, if you're American, of cyber diplomats, of which I'm very lucky to be one of this growing cadre of people based and looking after kind of the ASEAN, Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific region. Now, in my talk, which we'll go through, I've tried to structure and to try and be kind of like focused around 3 kind of areas and topics. The first is a bit of an overview. Why does the UK feel this is such an important area? Why are we trying to build on this? Why are we trying to create this network? Secondly, around kind of the key issues and thought processes behind why we've come to where we've come to in our digital diplomacy positions. And that kind of gives you the guidelines, the journey about how we move forward. And then finally, a bit of the practical, how has the UK gone? This is a very different state of affairs to what MFAs and in the UK, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, how it approaches diplomacy, how we created this kind of new form, this new kind of breed of diplomats to kind of populate the globe. And hopefully there'll be some interesting lessons there for Malaysia. And then lastly, and I'm not going to even apologize for this, I have no intention today of shying away from difficult topics that I know that at times Malaysia may come in a different position or value view to where the United Kingdom is. I'm here to talk about the United Kingdom's experience, and I very much value that every country is able to take their own position and structure, and I'll try and flag it when that happens. So, for example, we may talk about malign state activity. I'm pretty sure I'm going to cover things such as our offensive cyber capability in the UK. We can talk about public attribution and deterrence, really interesting, exciting topics. And all I can say is this is not about us trying to lobby or anything. This is about us trying to explain. And I'm more than up for an interesting debate or even a discussion at the end of this conversation. So I'm glad. Thank you, Mohammed, for bringing up slide 2. Birth of cyber digital diplomacy. So for the UK, digital cyber kind of moment has come. For a very long time, it's been very a niche or marginalized area in diplomacy circles. And everyone goes, well, it's not important now. We can kind of see it's been helpful. We can now do Zoom calls online. But why is this important? It's not really important for diplomacy. But increasingly, for the UK at least, at the heart we see cyberspace at the heart of everything that we do around national security, our economic policy, our foreign policy considerations. And this has really come to light in the last few months, where the UK's done a really big document. It's a bit of a page turner and 99 pages, which is the integrated review of security, defence, development and foreign policy, which essentially is how is the UK in the next 10 years going to go over and look at how is it going to do its foreign policy, how is it going to engage with international partners. And we really do see that cyber has taken a huge prominent position. Cyber power is now seen as a critical national asset. We'll talk a bit about cyber power in a moment. But what has really come out of this whole journey is that this is something that we need to engage our partner countries across the world on. I'm very proud to say that Malaysia's one, which is why I'm here today, and I'm hoping this is going to be useful. Deepening our shared understanding, developing the skills needed to help manage both at an operational and governance level, and making sure that both our governments, our private sector and our academia are kind of in lockstep with each other is going to be really critical. And what we're finding, what we believe in the UK, is that if the countries, we can do it better, that is hopefully going to translate to better prosperity to countries that aren't able to kind of, or are struggling to get that kind of information and position around their kind of digital diplomacy and kind of controlling where they see cyberspace is. And I think that's really important for us, is to help every country to engage and understand their cyber ecosystem, because that makes it easier for us to engage and discuss and talk through. But even going back to that, it's worth noting that in the UK, I love to say that I'm with this huge, like, you know, we haven't got an LD network. This is still a relatively new area for the UK, even though we've got this cyber diplomatic network up. 10 years ago, the UK launched our kind of cross-government cyber security strategy, which was kind of the beginning of this kind of consolidation journey to help build our cyber defenses, expertise, partnership with industry, and international engagement. At the time, and this is still very active and even more in people's minds, we recognize that prosperity and security depended on our ability to take advantage of new technologies to grow our digital economy, to help improve our society and our capability to support our citizens, as well as governments, while mitigating risks and staying ahead of our competitors. This has been a huge a huge kind of priority for us. Over the last 5 years, £1.9 billion, I'm not too sure how much that is in Malaysian currency, I'm sure someone can do some math for me, to build those capabilities, including the creation of the National Cybersecurity Centre, our national hub, which responds to major cyber incidents and provides user-friendly kind of expertise to business and individuals. So, Mohammed, can we go to the next slide, if possible? Slide 3, if possible. Well, we'll get to it in a second, I'm sure. But I think one of the big things about the strategy is that it's an integrated whole of government efforts, bringing together kind of all the different ministries and kind of, well, we call them in the UK departments, but ministries together. Foreign, defence, the Home Ministry, the Business Ministry, digital and economic ministries, our intelligence agencies, government kind of digital services, and IT security experts. And one of the areas that we've really managed to make how that helped happen, thank you for moving on, is that that was coordinated by every single department that you see on the list at the moment. Has kind of a role in the cybersecurity journey and how we engage with international partners. That was all helped coordinate by a cabinet office, which is our equivalent to the Prime Minister's office. And it was very much through kind of their kind of ability to bring everyone together under an umbrella that's helped us develop our kind of cybersecurity journey. Can we move to the next slide as well? Just things. So that just shows an example of how different departments and different ministries in the UK look and regard cybersecurity. Moving on, I mentioned earlier cyber power. This is rapidly being seen as a really important asset and a really important thing that we need to measure in the UK, a critical national asset. It's something that is in an area that is of increasing importance globally. There's lots of different ways. We use something around called the Harvard Belford Center kind of definition of cyber power, but it's a very broad sense that we use this terminology, including defensive capabilities, our research and development, our industrial and skills base, as well as kind of diplomatic relationships and thought leadership in the area. And that again just shows that this is wider than just cybersecurity focused on hostile attacks. This is about the whole cyber ecosystem. And that's kind of an important asset to remember as we look at the wider digital diplomacy. And then lastly, it represents the maturity of kind of cyber. And I mentioned this earlier, but one of the things that we've launched recently is the UK National Cyber Force, which kind of brings combined military and a kind of intelligence-based capability together. This, I know, is part of kind of the international global debate about what is the rightful use of kind of offensive cyber and whether there are legal and lawful rationales on being able to use this. The UK believes there are, and we think it's irresponsible not to be developing military cyber capabilities to compete on the modern battlefield. Indeed, there are times where we believe that cyber interventions, legal and lawful interventions in cyber, would have far more impact and reduce the risk of civilian casualties and wider challenges with kind of physical interventions. And therefore, would be irresponsible for us not to look through this. But cyber power is much more than kind of offensive capabilities. And as we always say in the UK, offensive kind of capabilities should always be the choice of last resort. To compete in a digitally connected world, we do believe we need to develop these assets, but they should always complement and support more traditional economic, political, and military strengths. So that's kind of a bit of the background. I'm going to quickly rattle through. So can we go to the next slide, if possible? I mentioned earlier that one of the big page turner, our 99-page review, kind of flags. I just want to quickly walk through these kind of 4 big pillars, which explains a little on why where the UK's position is on many of these issues and why this is important for us to engage and the use of our diplomatic network. So the first is around science and technology, which is, we see the highest importance component of our national security, helping to boost our capability and managing the risks more actively around global technology supply chains. Gone is the day that everything is dealt with in country. We are part of a globalized network, and it's very important that we recognize this, not just in our own supply chain, international in the UK, but recognize the need for partners and allies, and to help champion like the principles the UK hold very dear around free markets, open societies, and that very much underpins where we say a free, open, peaceful, and secure cyberspace. But we're also very honest that some critical technologies are now becoming increasingly important and globalized and politicized. And we need to be clear where there are potential vulnerabilities in supply chains and engagement, and also work with our allies and partners to close those vulnerabilities, while also not giving in to kind of protectionist tendencies that potentially could undermine the concepts of free trade that we have really been pushing forward over like the last few years. Well, not the last few years, it's the basis, the principle of kind of UK kind of international engagement. Cyber resilience, also important. And we've been talking a bit about that. We've talked a little bit about the supply chain side of the house, but it remains really, really important as we face challenges in the political space. There's lots of challenges, obviously, you know about the critical supply chain around 5G, and we remain firmly opposed to the concerns that political kind of differences and bifurcation will move into the technological space and the potential fragmentation of the internet. Very, very dangerous and very kind of as an important area that we need to engage across the globe. But there's also wider kind of challenges around cyber resilience that we've seen recently. And it's important that both public and private sector continue to invest and prioritize cybersecurity. Really good example, I don't know, many of you have heard of SolarWinds. You may not have done a few months ago, you probably do now, about how obviously one single vulnerability in a supply chain company has caused big ripples through governments about the dangers and the risks. But this was essentially the final straw that broke the camel's back across a number of potential risks that people have seen. And what we would say, the answer to that threat starts with better defenses, technical capabilities, and it's important that we work with our partner countries to help build their capabilities, but also education of business and individuals, and leading up to the importance of governance within your own countries, but also interacting with your partner countries where your supply chains lie. And I keep on saying this, we live in a globalized economy where we have to rely on international partners to maintain our way of life, our economic prosperity. And this does remain a huge threat and challenge to how countries such as the UK, such as Malaysia, look and engage and try and maintain that resilience. Resilience, as I said, has this international dimension, and we've seen lots of challenges, potentially some that the UK have perceived as hostile state activity, Others just as general cybercrime that potentially got out of control. For example, we know that malicious codes targeted against the government of Ukraine unintentionally took out Maersk, a Danish shipping company, or a German pharmaceutical company, for example. We are only as safe as each other. And that's why, as the UK supports global capacity building and why it remains a really key priority for us. And just an example, we supported since 2012, 36 million in cybersecurity programs, and we've worked in more than 100 countries. And we also very much support the work of the Global Forum of Cyber Expertise, GFCE, which remains a really important body to help match cyber needs with people who can provide and support those needs, particularly for developing nations. Thirdly, cyber ecosystem. Again, very important, and it's something you would think is very domestically focused. We want to help build our capabilities. We need to ensure we have the skill, a pipeline to develop that capability up and make sure that we have the right staff at the right time. But what I would flag in this international space very briefly is that it very much flags the importance, again, of engaging with partner countries. We want to develop partnership and collaboration. We want to encourage skilled exchange of capabilities and labor to help develop, to help share expertise and experience in different countries. We want to be able to attract foreign talent and demonstrate the importance of these areas and help grow. And I hope that on occasion Malaysia has seen that around potentially academic kind of exchanges, collaboration, partnership, gov engagement, but also working with UK companies. This remains an important part of our role, and I would imagine it's an important part of the journey that Malaysia is taking as well. And then the fourth area, just to talk about, is around cyber attacks. How do we respond to cyber attacks? One of the big things, one of the big journeys, and one of the things why the cyber diplomacy network is so important to the UK is that we're seeing a growing increase in number, volume, and complexity of cyber attacks from both cyber criminals and state actors around the area and globally. And this affects everybody. It affects the UK, it affects Europe, it affects Malaysia, it affects ASEAN. And we need to come together as a global community to really help find ways that we can deter this activity from happening. And there's lots of different things against both state and non-state actors, and embed international norms of acceptable behaviour. I know Farlina knows very well that I've been doing a lot of work around kind of what the UN has been doing, around the UN cyber framework, norms of responsible state behaviour. But ultimately, the goal, I'm hoping, is the same for every country, is to basically protect and make your systems more resilient, to minimize the impact of cyber attacks so that there is less value for cyber attacks to happen, and also to potentially shine a spotlight and ensure that cyber attackers realize there are consequences for doing malign state activity that goes against the grain of the principles that all member states have agreed upon in the UN. There's lots of areas we can talk about here. The UK, for example, has a strong cyber deterrence toolkit on how it engages with kind of foreign stakeholders or when they detect malign activity, all the way from kind of private engagement, from resilience mapping once an attack has happened, all the way up to public attribution and potential further escalation. It's a really challenging area, this, but I think what I'm trying to say is that it's not just good enough to say, well, these are what good rules look like in the UN, this is what we're going to do and move forward. It's also about showing that what happens if those rules are breached, what happens if there is evidence that that something bad has happened. Is that country just going to be allowed to move on without any consequence? Again, it's a very challenging journey. The UK works very closely with our stakeholders. We'll be trying to help build threat awareness, capability to detect, and be able to identify where those threats occur. which is a very difficult task in cyberspace, but remains kind of a key priority. And that's kind of bringing together, like, is why we value our international partnerships and helping to shape the rules and norms in state behaviour. We do not want in the UK to see this, you know, we firmly believe in the concept of globalization, of free trade, of an open, free, peaceful and secure cyberspace. And we're really worried and concerned about this drift to protectionism. And that's a big challenge for us. What I would also say is that cyberspace has fundamentally changed the picture of kind of diplomatic engagements. And we mentioned, as Sharaman very helpfully mentioned at the very beginning, is that the defense of the status quo of the post-Cold War era in cyberspace is no longer sufficient for what's happening in this world, in this space. And that we need to be much more proactive rather than say, oh no, you know, this is what we believe in, we're just going to hold to the lines. The UK believes we need to be much more proactive, going out, engaging, talking to our stakeholders, talking to Malaysia, talking to all our kind of key partners to work out how we can pragmatically move this forward and kind of make that things. But, and it's been positive. There's been some really positive discussions in the UN, but remains an uphill challenge. So I hope that gives a bit of an explanation of where the UK is. Let's talk briefly about kind of the Cadre, or Cadre, which I'm part of. Can we move to the next slide, please? Sorry, well, there we go. There's some examples of some attacks, but and a reason why it's important. I can go through those images if you want me later, but let's move on to the Cadre side. So what are the key lessons? If there was interest, what would I say are the really important things to note around obviously building this Cadre up? And the first is, this is a whole of government effort. And the UK has really seen this very much the two-part deal. It wasn't enough just to have diplomats go out and engage and talk, you know, just cover a brief. They needed people who could talk the talk and had lived at least certain aspects of the UK digital system. It was also important that those people had the capability to be diplomatic and not be sometimes the quite blunt approach that is needed to deliver kind of cyber capacity building in the UK. So one of the big things that we've been trying to do is develop a kind of a mixture of knowledge and capability. I myself have not come from a traditional diplomatic background. I've worked in our department for kind of culture, media and skills. I was responsible for EU kind of legislation when the UK was part of the EU around the Network Information Security Directive. I've had lots of interesting areas such as engage the entirety of the UK business system about cybersecurity measures and governance. I've done smart city technology. I've done development, also international development and digital kind of access areas. So I have a wider variety of things, but that has enabled me to be able to engage much more easily with stakeholders from all these various departments and ministries. And it's a very big reflection of what SCGO leads to diplomatic engagements. Other ministries and departments have very important stakes in this. And I have to be a bit of a jack of all trades to be able to bring that together. Secondly, and I kind of mentioned this around the comprehensive network, we have this link, and the good thing about the UK, there are structured, there is bringing all those departments and ministries together to ensure that we have like common briefs, really clear instructions on where the latest kind of UK capabilities and where our priorities lie. And that's very important that continues. In the UK, that is really aligned to our national cybersecurity strategy. We're coming to the end of our last 5-year period, and I'm hoping in the next few months we'll have a new one. And I've had big reassurances that there's going to be a big section on international engagement as part of that. But that in turn, as I said, is going to be part of what's this wider integrated review paper. So the integrated review paper is the wider kind of the overarching approach to international engagement. The national cybersecurity strategy is about how all government engagement happens around cyber, both in the domestic and international space. Next up, training, really important. This is such an emerging field. I wish I could say I was the expert on everything. I really am not. But it's really important that there's regular training sessions, engagement, and I really value the fact that even though I'm out at post, my views are welcome across many different areas, and I train people back in London, but I also get regular briefing from our research analysts about the latest in quantum, AI, 5G, 6G, data policy. And it's important to build that knowledge base and that capability in a regular drumbeat to ensure that the staff remains trained and knowledgeable, even though they may be many, many miles away from home base and might not have that time, but at least can understand what is happening in the space. And then I think lastly, it's a career progression structure. It's very important. As I said, this is a cross-government approach. My hopes are that when I finish this posting, 4 years, currently meant to be regional, but it's been very focused in Singapore. I'm hoping that will change in the next few years. I will go to another cyber or digital role. That may not be international focused, but that may be domestic focused. But the idea that these people have skills and that the digital and cyber knowledge that I have picked up and developed and seen as good practice across ASEAN, Malaysia and Singapore will be fed back into that network, and I can continue to grow that capability. And that's a really important for me to see and for the network to understand there is a career progression of where we're going and moving towards. So I'm hoping that's been a bit interesting, canter through everything. Would I say, has it worked? I would say we're still in our infancy in the UK. It's been quite challenging. This is a very different way to how diplomatic systems work. I feed into sectoral leads back in London rather than regional leads. And there remains quite some challenges and, where we potentially, particularly when I'm talking with different government departments and ministries, and they may have slightly overlapping government objectives, or where government objectives don't quite align with each other. And that will always be a tension, because we're trying to create a system that doesn't quite fit in the status quo of how the UK has done diplomatic engagements. But what I have, and I will note, I've seen really positive reaction with partner countries. They very much value that there are people who kind of know this stuff and have a bit more knowledge than your basic diplomats. And I think there's an overall feeling that this has been a very positive engagement for the UK, and something that we will look to carry on and continue. We want to help other countries build up their capabilities, which is one of the reasons I'm talking today. And it's been very useful as we move forward on this. So anyway, I think I'm going to stop there. I've talked a lot. I'm hoping that's been a useful canter. And I really look forward to hearing your questions and the response from Ms. Hafisa Abdullah in a second. But back to you, Farlina.
Thank you so much, Henry, for that. And just a response in the chat box in regards to the conversion for the 1.9 billion pounds. Mr. Crispin Coates actually mentioned it's 11 billion Malaysian ringgit. So that will be the amount. I think you've actually presented very interesting points, particularly when it comes to the objective or the strategic objectives of the UK. I think that if I'm actually right, the slide that you actually had, the 4 boxes, which is the UK Integrated Review on Security Defense, and that would actually be the general objectives. Would that be actually the objectives that's divided across the different institutions, or is that actually just for the Foreign Commonwealth Office?
So that Integrated Review is a cross-government document that covers all the interests and engagements across the entirety of government, although obviously the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office had a very important part because they do lead the international side. But those 4 cover every single objective. So if it's DCMS, our Digital Culture, Media and Sports, I think that's right, departments, the stimuli actors in this world, they lead on international engagements and digital economy. Their objectives would have to fit around those 4 areas. But obviously they will look at it with their own lens, looking at, international engagement with digital economy. They'll be looking at it on regulatory standards and that side of the house. Just as MOD would be looking at from a military lens, NCSC an operational cyber lens.
All right, that's actually very interesting. It probably gives us a thing or two to think about when it comes to Malaysia's own national cybersecurity strategy. I think we'll move the floor to Puan Hafiza, who I'm actually quite curious to what she actually has to say about Malaysia diplomacy and probably cyber diplomacy. If it's possible, may I actually turn the floor to you? Puan Hafiza, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Farlina, for being a good moderator. And thank you, Mr. Henry Cover, for a very concise and thorough introduction to the cyber diplomacy from the UK perspective. Before I start, allow me to offer condolences on the passing of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Now, coming back to the topic of the discussion, which is getting off the menu to the table, developing a cadre of cyber diplomats. I will tackle this from a trainer and practitioner of diplomacy's point of view. I also enlightened by Mr. Carver's presentation, which showed us the efforts by the UK government, not only in developing and further on strengthening the cyber ecosystem in the country, but also in using its cyber capabilities to strategically position the UK's leadership in the cyberspace issue. Now, Mr. Carver's explanation on UK's cyber priorities highlighted several key points that also have similarity on approaches to Malaysia's cybersecurity concern. For Malaysia, all of our national cybersecurity functions are under the purview of the National Cybersecurity Agency, or NACSA. Established in February 2017, NACSA aims at securing and strengthening Malaysia's resilience in facing the threats of cyber attacks, and also by coordinating and consolidating the nation's best experts and resources in the field. So basically, the government mandates to NACSA goes on further to formulate, monitor, coordinate, and synchronize implementation of cybersecurity policy, framework, and strategy to safeguard the government and businesses and the public at large. So in this regard, when we compare the Malaysia's experience and the UK's experience, we have the similarities in terms of the functions of the agencies. Now, the Malaysian government strategy in strengthening and advancing Malaysia's interest in cybersecurity post-COVID-19 is well planned out in the Malaysia Cybersecurity Strategy 2020 to 2024. So what this document basically is that it is a strategic document which outlines the objectives that will govern all aspects of cybersecurity planning and implementation of Malaysia until 2024. So the strategy outlines 5 pillars and 12 implementation that holistically touch all aspects of Malaysia's cybersecurity concerns, including the governance and management, legislation and enforcement, local industry development, innovation and technology, research and development, R&D, capacity and capability building, awareness and education, as well as international engagement and cooperation. So if we look at MCSS, its implementation strategies addresses the key points that Mr. Carver also has just highlighted to us. So in effective governance and management, what the strategy would address is we want to enhance the national cybersecurity governance by trying to improve the organization, management, and business operation among the government, the critical national information infrastructure, as well as business entities. And it also try to strengthening the cybersecurity incident and management and active cyber defense. On the second pillar, which is to strengthening the legislative framework and enforcement, our strategy is to enhance Malaysia's cyber laws in addressing current and emerging threats. So as you can see, with COVID-19, there's as mentioned, rightly mentioned by Mr. Carver, there's an cyber laws that are being misused or abused by some irresponsible entities, organization, and this has made the job more challenging. And under this pillar as well, what the strategy is, we are trying to enhance the capacity and capability of cybercrime enforcement. So this is key in ensuring that we address the cybersecurity concerns in Malaysia. In the third pillar that we have is to catalyzing world-class innovation, technology, R&D, and industry. So basically, from 20 to 24, we are also putting our investment into spurring the national cybersecurity R&D program, and we will promote by promoting the creation and local technologies and competitive local industries. And the fourth pillar is about developing capacity and capability building, awareness and education. So this is where we will enhance the national cybersecurity capacity and capabilities through education and awareness and capacity building. So we are nourishing the cybersecurity knowledge through education. And we hope that with that, it will enhance cybersecurity awareness among the Malaysian public. And finally, on the fifth pillar, which is strengthening the global cooperation, this is where the document outlines ways to strengthening our international collaboration and cooperation in cybersecurity affairs with at regional level and international level. So we are looking at our partners who have the expertise that we can, share, and we can do a joint collaboration in addressing the cyber concern. And finally, under this pillar also, we strive to demonstrate Malaysia's proactiveness in promoting secure, stable, and peaceful cyberspace. So another similarity that Malaysia shares with UK is on the cross-government strategy. So in Malaysia case, of course, because the nature of the cyber world is such that it has no boundaries, no physical boundaries. So rightly so, in our case, there are also several ministries and agencies that work closely with NACSA to address cybersecurity concern. So the ministries and agencies in charge of national defense and securities, banking and finance, information and communication, energy, transportation, water, health services, government, emergency services, food and agriculture, and you name it, basically covers all, are part of the Malaysian cross-government approach to cybersecurity. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that when in addressing the cybersecurity issues, NACSA also relies on the expertise and the expertise of other ministries and agencies in their core subjects and also in cyber issues. Along the line, Mr. Cadre has also mentioned about the importance of multilateral engagement in cyberspace. I also agree with him on this front with similar reasonings that he mentioned earlier. But for your information, Malaysia, in terms of Malaysia, Malaysia has been playing an active role in the cybersecurity efforts through multiple ASEAN-led mechanisms, namely through the ASEAN Network Security Action Council, the ASEAN Regional Forum, Intersessional Meeting on Security and Use of ICT, ARF. We also play an active role under the ASEAN Defense Ministerial Meeting plus Expert Working Group on Cybersecurities. And there are a few other ASEAN-led mechanisms that Malaysia plays a very active role on. So we found that with in addressing cybersecurity issues, at ASEAN level, we work together with our other ASEAN member countries in not only to come up with a way of platforms that we can address common concerns, but also to project the ways on to move forward with in terms of policy. So the ongoing cybersecurity efforts are not only realized with ASEAN member states, but also through the support of ASEAN dialogue partners and other countries, including the UK. So I found that Malaysia found that engagement with other countries are important, especially more so now, because through this exchange, through this collaboration and engagement, Malaysia can exchange information and share our expertise and develop partnership with other countries who have far advanced knowledge and information and expertise in cyber security issues. Now, within the ASEAN context, we saw that there has been a significant increase in access to the internet in ASEAN. So that is a given. So with this advancement of internet access, there's also a rapid digital growth that is, that being, and also bring huge benefit to the region. But the question is whether with the rapid growth of internet access and digitalization, at what cost to the population? So realizing this, it is why elevating cybersecurity and cyber diplomacy should be one of our major priorities for the region. And when it comes to cybersecurity, a top-down strategy is vital in providing adequate protection, building a culture of cybersecurity throughout the nation, develop and maintain secure systems, prepare the workforce with the right cybersecurity skills, as well as understand and have understanding of the clear threats are essential to secure the digital future. We should also resource capabilities within our region that could build and enable collective action in not only in strategy, but also in policy, technical, law enforcement, and diplomacy. Nevertheless, we also need to be conscious that protection measures that we implement need to balance with the ease of use. While monitoring and detection measures are essential, privacy needs to be preserved. Securing digital future indicates trust and stability. Failing to embed effective security measures will erode trust and undermine the stability of information societies. And thus, this making our digital platform as a source of risk more than as a source of development. And I believe that this is the accepted wisdom that made the global community work together to increase security of the cyberspace. In addressing the developing cadre of cyber diplomats, the cyber diplomacy is indeed a new field and it changes a lot with our technology advances. The fast-paced nature of the field requires different set of skills and time to nurture a talent of pool in cyber security. But unlike FCDO, Wisma Putra cyber diplomats in its true sense are only handful. And they are only either stationed at the ICT divisions or at the communication and public diplomacy division. So they do have the access and linkages within the national boundary with other, but in terms of networking at a larger level, it's still at a limited coverage. Realizing this, the need to embrace this and to build talent, IFR has started to embark training that focuses on cyber diplomacy and cyber security to our junior diplomats before they are posted to Malaysia, to Malaysian diplomatic missions abroad. But we found that there's challenges in terms of getting the experts and also the resources. As much as we want to give them the exposure on the cybersecurity front and to have engagement with not only experts in Malaysia but also international. But we found that to find the right expert in the right field that understands the nature of work of diplomats are really challenging. But nevertheless, we are we are exploring certain avenues, and we are working closely with our other ministries and agencies, and as well as other diplomatic institutes across the board, across the globe, And we're looking into ways that we can, basically explore new areas of training that can be beneficial for both Malaysia and that particular diplomatic training institute. So basically, to get or to develop a pool of talent, it is possible. For the optimistic side of me would say yes, it is possible with the right mix of talent, with the right mix of resources, and we can have a cadre of diplomats, cyber diplomats. But in terms of the reality of the workings, I think it will take some time, because currently cybersecurity in terms of training of cyber diplomats is slow in progress. And but the positive thing is that we have already started. So at least we have started, and now it's just to develop these talents to become a full-fledged cyber diplomats in the future. So I think I covered most of what I want to cover, and I look forward to have the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Puan Hafiza, for the candid presentation, actually, covering everything from the foreign policy, Malaysia's perspective in cyber issues, as well as the concerns in regards to those cyber issues and some of the issues faced by developing the cadre or cyber diplomats for Malaysia. So to hand the floor over to Mr. Muhammad Sinatra for some Q&A, I'll probably open the floor. Please drop your questions in the Q&A function instead of the chat function, if it's all right, but do continue to chat in the chat box. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Falina, and thank you so much, Puan Hafiza and Mr. Carver, for the insightful presentations this morning. My name is Sinatra. I'm an analyst in Foreign Policy and Security Studies, ISIS Malaysia, and I shall be navigating this Q&A section. At this point, we still have yet to see any questions in the Q&A function, so I would still encourage participants to please drop your questions in the Q&A. Oh, there you go. We have one already from Mr. Crispin Coates. Okay, question for Mr. Carver. Where does he feel the main cyber threats come from? Sorry, Mr. Carver, you're muted.
That's an intriguing question, and I think so. If we're looking at specific cyber security threats to the UK, because obviously it's a global challenge and issue, the UK has its fair share of cybercrime from non-state actors, and we're seeing a rise in cyber kind of criminal activity, mainly based around phishing and kind of low-level key attacks, targeting the old ladies who don't quite know how to protect their bank account details, and that will always continue, and that's something we actively try and manage and mitigate. We have something in the UK known as active cyber defense that the NTSC implements, and we have Get Safe Online, which is trying to encourage and improve the basic skills. But yes, the UK going into the wider, the kind of international state actors, I won't go too far into this. I will say that there is evidence the UK has publicly attributed where it believes that certain state actors have engaged and the malign cyber activity. Generally, this is not around disruption to kind of actual capabilities. It's more trying to get information and data and wider data sets. But again, it depends on who the actor is, what their motivation is for doing so. I believe the UK, and I will hopefully get this right and everything, I know we have attributed challenges both from where we've seen from Russia and wider other actors as well. I'll have to double check exactly what we publicly attributed. There's always a wider list that's going on. We see that as one of the primary and most dangerous kind of nation state activity, given the amount of resources and capability that they have to be able to implement those kind of cyber attacks and breaches. including, for example, having zero-day exploits, etc., that are actually quite costly for non-state actors with less resources to utilize. I don't know, I felt I was being slightly diplomatic there, but I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carver. I forgot to mention earlier that we only have around 13 minutes left for the Q&A. So please, we've seen some questions trickling in, but others, if you still have questions, please don't hesitate at all. So I'm looking at the chat box right now from one William Lee. I guess this is a question to both Puan Hafiza and Mr. Carver. What new skills are needed for cyber diplomats? Especially because Mr. Carver mentioned about training, and Puan Hafiza mentioned some difficulties regarding training cyber diplomats in Malaysia. So yeah, I would ask for your opinions on this, maybe starting with Puan Hafiza. Sorry, Puan, you are muted. Somehow we cannot hear your voice.
Oh.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So some of the set skills that are required would be knowledgeable in the cyber in technologies, knowledgeable in terms of basically you must have a mix of diplomacy and also the set skills of being experts in the goings on in the technologies and the ICTs, because without both, then you won't be called cyber diplomats. But to become a real cyber diplomats, I would say that the knowledge and your expertise in ICT related technologies and softwares, that is more important. Only then you can communicate and you can understand the world of this in this, they call it cyber world. Just to be a career diplomat in the traditional diplomatic sense of the word, cyber diplomacy is new. So for us here, the challenge at the institute is how to mix the old or the traditional diplomacy and bring it forward to the ICT-driven kind of training. So that is the challenge that we are facing now. So to me, if you want to create a good and effective cyber diplomats, the individual must possess both the diplomatic acumen as well as the knowledge, being knowledgeable in the cyber issues and cyber, cyber concerns. Yeah.
Okay. Over to you, Mr. Carver.
So very quickly, yeah. So number one, you still need to be a good diplomat. That's the traditional skills. Number two, you need to have an understanding of tech and emerging technology and what it potentially can be used for in the political kind of in the national state. It's not just enough to have the operational knowledge. It's enough to know what it can be used for, because that's kind of the key thing that the politicians, they don't care about the nuts and bolts. They care for what does the technology mean for statecraft in the future. And then the third, having a bit of the history around the bilateral, multilateral kind of discussions and understanding the narrative. But I completely agree with everything that Hafiza said before me as well.
All right, there is a related question here from Ms. Elina Noor to Puan Hafiza. Do you see a role for an ambassador for cyber affairs and emerging technologies or something similar for Malaysia?
Yeah, I have to. Well, currently, when we're talking about present terms, I don't see the role yet. But the role of ambassadors is such a way that they are versatile. When we discuss issues or when we present the country, basically we are promoting and defending our national interests. So the cyber diplomacy comes under that umbrella. So mostly our ambassadors are well equipped in terms of their knowledge and their skills. But to have title, a position of role of ambassadors for cyber affairs, I think it's, I don't see we going to have it anytime soon, because we already have our ambassadors that are representing the countries. Yes, that would be my reply.
Thank you, Puan Hafiza. In fact, I see more questions addressed to you, but let's give you some time to take some breath. Over to you, Mr. Carver. This question: what is the main strategy of cyber attribution in UK in terms of standard of proof?
Okay, so just quickly going through. So here we're talking about technical attribution, which is when all the experts pore over what's happened in an attack and looks at exactly, the evidence, the operational technical evidence that they have to be able to say, we think, country X or organization Y was potentially involved. That is a job for our kind of capability. So the National Cybersecurity Center and wider kind of apparatus to engage and develop and pull that together along a certain scale of certainty that they'll have. And then that will then be brought to our kind of ministerial boards or the people who've been brought together to manage that, sometimes under what we call the COBRA kind of response. And the director of the NCSC, currently a lady called Lindy Cameron, will then present that, and all the different departments and ministries will then provide their own views of, if there's any further information that are available to demonstrate technical attribution. Public attribution then is a decision made or how we choose to respond, which is our deterrence toolkit. That is a separate area, and we very clearly differentiate. There's a technical attribution, how the UK works it out. What we do after that is part of our deterrence toolkit, and they're two separate things.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carver. This one is from anonymous attendee to Puan Hafiza again. Could you please share some case studies regarding maritime cybersecurity in the UK and Malaysia? And for Puan Hafiza specifically, does the MCSS 2020 to 2024 address maritime cybersecurity? Thank you.
Okay, my forte is on the training side. So since the participants would like to inquire more about the maritime cybersecurity issues, so we have a maritime department. So if they can forward the question, and I will forward it to the maritime department for for a reply or a response from them, so that they get the correct information. Yes.
Thank you, Puan Hafiza. Do you have any response to that, Mr. Carver, regarding case studies regarding maritime cybersecurity in the UK?
Well, not on me right this moment in time. Generally, we have different sectoral certs that look after different areas, and yes, there are areas that look after maritime security, which are key. I'm sure we can try and look into that moving forward. Yeah, so I think very similar answer to Mr. Fisa.
Okay, all right. So we're taking a turn to domestic concern here. A question by Tashni Sukumaran, one of our senior analysts at ISIS Malaysia. Malaysia has seen massive issues regarding the sharing of non-consensual intimate images such as revenge porn, as well as child pornography, usually through Telegram groups. What are multilateral and bilateral measures? And also, what roles could big tech companies play that could be taken to improve child protections in cyberspace? I don't know who will be more suited to answer this question. Maybe Mr. Carver, can you try?
Yes. So this is going. So this starts, and this is where we start getting into different like spheres of influence, and we start moving away from cybersecurity, which is when you break the internet, you you deliberately force a car off the road, and about the content that happens within the roads. That's how I always try and see things. And we're now talking about online content. Difficult situation. Obviously, we do not want to see kind of certain malicious content online, be it related to terrorism or like child abuse imagery. The UK has done a lot of work around this. We call it around online harms. We're currently doing an online safety bill. And this is about regulators. We're trying to install a regulator that people with digital content online will have to kind of set their guidelines and standards and how they're going to moderate their content, and also how they're going to, and that will then incur penalties should they not follow through. And that also includes international subsidiaries on where UK users can access that content. Again, it's an international discussion. It links to lots of wider things such as end-to-end encryption that Facebook are looking to put in, and how do we balance that need for privacy with ensuring that these really like kind of repulsive imagery or this really bad content online is you know, people are safe and do not have to see that. I'll be interested, obviously, how Malaysia are dealing with that. But yes, it's slightly different to cybersecurity.
Puan Hafizah, do you have anything to say regarding this question?
I think,
oh, sorry, Puan, you are muted again.
I think when it, you know, with specific crime or activities, or I think the cooperation that has been established perhaps at the law enforcement levels, and Malaysia has a good cooperation with Interpol, so that is the best platform to address those kind of criminal activities. But in terms of policy making to address the issues we have at ASEAN level, it's already being discussed at multiple ASEAN levels discussion. But it is only a bigger strategy or policy. But in terms of specific ways to address the crime, I think it will go to the law enforcement, you know, collaboration between Malaysia and other countries, and also Malaysia's active participation in Interpol. Yeah.
Thank you, Puan Hafizah. I think maybe that's a message for Palinta to arrange another webinar on cybercrime in Malaysia. I think that would attract some attention from the public here in Malaysia. Okay, I think we have one last minute to just one more question, perhaps. I'll allow a few more minutes for this last question. From Marinette Kham, thank you for the speakers for the insightful presentations. Let me have one question to both speakers. If it's possible, may you highlight the correlations between cyber diplomacy, digital diplomacy, and digital foreign policy? Who wants to start first? Mr. Carver? Yeah.
Okay, so this is actually quite an interesting one, because every time, like, and this is a thing that the UK has been learning. Originally, we were my department is called cyber policy back in London. But whenever anyone talks to them, they get very confused because they think cyber, oh, that must be just cyber security. And reality, the cyber mainly stands for like cyberspace, which is the wider kind of correlation and more linked with digital. So my first point is I think cyber diplomacy, digital diplomacy pretty much means the same thing, interchangeable. It's just sometimes it's easier for people who are not quite too familiar. Digital diplomacy covers a wider remit, of which cybersecurity is one of them, but other parts is emerging technology, supply chains, and we, as you can see, I know stuff around obviously the online harms side of the house, information security, data privacy, data policy. It gets wider. Digital foreign policy is mainly our kind of wider kind of direction of travel. It's kind of the objectives that we have as diplomats try to deliver through digital diplomacy and potentially other means as well. So digital foreign policy is a set of objectives that we look as a UK, that is our cardinal kind of our rule book, and that could be through diplomacy, that could be for academic collaboration, that could be through B2B, G2G work, and wider. So those are how I would define those three terms.
Over to you, Puan.
Yeah, similar to Mr. Carver, but just to put into perhaps perspective, when you talk about digital diplomacy, are we talking about digital diplomacy as the conduct or as the protocol. So if it is a conduct of diplomacy through if it is a conduct of diplomacy through digital means, it can also mean that, or it can also means that the digital diplomacy as the process or the procedure regarding the digital itself, either the conduct or the the procedures. But nowadays I've seen that most of the time it is used interchangeably, but actually in terms of meaning it has different meanings, slight difference in meaning. Yeah.
All right. I think we're already running out of time for this conversation. I'm so sorry for everyone whose questions we cannot address here, but if you'd still like your questions to be answered, please feel free to maybe email us or directly to the speakers regarding your questions. I think I will invite both speakers to deliver their maybe half a minute wrap-up remark, maybe starting with Puan Hafiza.
Thank you, Mr. Sinatra. For myself, because I find that this webinar is very interesting. Now that I've seen, and I heard the discussion on cyber diplomacy, I think it's time that we look seriously into building our own local talent in that, so that we are not far behind from other countries. And I also keen to know more about how the UK's experience in developing their own talent of pool of cyber diplomats. So perhaps if we can, it would be good if we can keep this conversation going, so that by as soon as end of this year, we can have Malaysia's own talent cyber diplomats. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Puan Hafiza. That's a very strong recommendation coming from you. And perhaps it's a message to everyone here to please develop your local talent for cyber issues, cyber capabilities. And that's also something that we might ponder upon for our collaboration with the UK government regarding development of local talents, cyber diplomats. Mr. Carver, your concluding remark?
So yes, this has been a really interesting, and I want to thank all the speakers. It's been really interesting and debate and discussion, and some of the questions as well. I would say that emerging technology remains, and kind of cyberspace will remain just an ever increasing important part of how diplomats have to engage. And the UK is very committed, just as it is to build up its own network, but to support and help others. We are by no means a perfect network at the moment. I can assure you that we continue to have challenges. It's only working together, sharing good practice, and finding our way through in a kind of with consensus that we can really build and drive and like meaningful debate and bilateral, multilateral circumstances, and help build kind of this, again, going back to the UK mantra, a free, open, peaceful, and secure cyberspace. Which is my core objective. If I achieve anything over the next 4 years and I can say I've done that, I'll be a very happy man. I'll be more than happy to engage with Malaysian colleagues and stakeholders to try and make that happen.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carver. I'll pass the space back to you, Palina.
Thank you very much, Sinatra, and thank you to our presenter, Mr. Henry Carver from the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in UK, as well as Puan Hafiza from the Institute of Diplomacy and Foreign Relations, MOFA. I believe we're ending that on a very strong note and very interesting ways and also optimistic ways forward. It sounds like there's also a great amount of room to actually speak not only about cyber diplomacy, but also things like cyber crime. And I think we actually did not touch on things like cyber power and also what that actually means for cyber diplomacy. So that would actually be an interesting topic for the future. Thank you very much to everyone for joining us and for the constant stream of questions. We do look forward to engaging you in a future platform or in a future conversation. Thank you. We do look forward to having you again.